Before Tupac Shakur became a legend, there was a man who showed him how. A man in a fake nose, thick glasses, and a smile that hid a lifetime of pain. His name was Shock G, the genius who turned laughter into art and rhythm into salvation. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing freedom, the kind that lives in a bass line, a snare hit, a voice that says, "We can be more than our struggle." When others rapped about anger, Shock rapped about light, about joy, about being proudly strange in a world that wanted conformity. As Humpty Hump, he gave hip-hop permission to laugh and still matter. As Gregory Jacobs, he gave the world Tupac Shakur, a gift no one can measure. He bridged generations, genres, and souls the clown with the wisdom of a poet, the mentor with the heart of a child. But genius is heavy, and somewhere between the tours, the fame, and the silence that follows applause, he started to slip away. Behind the mask was a man who gave everything to the music and found himself running out of breath. This is not just the story of a rapper. It's the story of a creator who carried too much light for one lifetime and still chose to share it with the world. Before there was the mask, there was a boy with a piano. Gregory Jacobs was born in Brooklyn in 1963. In a small apartment that shook with the sound of soul records and laughter. His mother named him after the great tap dancer Gregory Hines. She said she wanted her son to move through life with rhythm in his feet and grace in his heart. He grew up surrounded by music that felt like sunlight on vinyl. Stevie Wonder, The Temptations, Marvin Gaye. At 5 years old, he was already performing for relatives in the living room, banging on pots like drums, turning Sunday dinners into concerts. He didn't know it then, but rhythm would become his language, the only one that never lied to him. When his father's job took the family to Tampa, Florida, Gregory found himself in one of the first interracial neighborhoods in America. Kids of every color shared the same dirt road, the same laughter, the same dreams. It taught him something he never forgot, that music wasn't about race or money. It was about connection. By 11, he had formed his first band, the Inwood Specials. Named after their street, he was the drummer, the heartbeat. And even at that age, his beats carried more joy than technique. When the first band broke apart, he created another, Parliament 2, a teenage tribute to George Clinton and the P-Funk sound that would later define his career. They won local talent shows, sometimes with instruments borrowed from neighbors who believed in the kid who never stopped smiling. But when his parents divorced, Gregory's rhythm faltered. He moved back to New York with his mother, where hip-hop was exploding from every block boom boxes, graffiti, street battles. He traded his drumsticks for 2 turntables and a dream, calling himself MC Starchild. The name didn't last, but the dream did. That's when he became Shock G. Back in Tampa, he joined friends from the East Coast to form a DJ crew called the Master Blasters. They threw block parties that felt like revolutions, lights strung between trees, speakers humming under the stars. Florida didn't know hip-hop yet, but Shock brought New York with him. He was a teenager, teaching a city how to move. One night, a local radio director saw him spin the way he controlled the crowd like an orchestra. He was hired on the spot as one of the youngest on-air DJs in Florida. For a while, it felt like destiny was calling. But destiny, like radio, can cut you off mid-song. He got fired for playing a 15-minute George Clinton track in a 4-minute time slot. Too much funk, the boss said. Shock G laughed, but it hurt. At 18, broke and restless, he enrolled in Hillsborough Community College to study music theory and piano. He wanted to understand the science behind what he felt. He learned chords, harmony, composition, but what he truly learned was that music could hold both chaos and calm in the same note. When Florida ran out of chances, he and his girlfriend packed their dreams into a car and drove to California. He worked odd jobs, played piano for a funk band called Onyx, and finally landed in Oakland, the city that would become his spiritual home. He sold records by day, made beats by night, and met Chop Master Jay, the man who would help him turn imagination into history. Oakland in the 80s was alive. Street murals, poetry, pain, and promise. Shock soaked it all in. He was ready to mix funk and freedom, laughter and truth. He didn't know it yet, but the mask and the movement were waiting for him. Oakland became his canvas. The streets were alive, with rhythm, car, radios, corner ciphers, laughter from the block. Shock G stood in the middle of it all, blending jazz, funk, and satire like a chef mixing flavors that shouldn't go together but somehow taste like truth. With Chop Master J and DJ Kenny K, he built a group that would rewrite what hip-hop could sound like digital underground. It wasn't just a name, it was a statement. They were using digital machines, but keeping the heart of live funk. Their shows felt more like theater than concerts, wild costumes, humor, and a kind of spiritual chaos that made people dance and think at the same time. Then came the moment that changed everything. October 1989, the release of Do What You Like. The song was strange, joyful, completely against the grain of what rap was supposed to be. While other MCs rapped about the streets, Shock G rapped about freedom, the right to just be. The single climbed the charts overseas, and the world started to pay attention. And then, it happened. A beat that would define an era, the Humpty Dance. The bass line bounced like a heartbeat, the voice playful yet soulful, the lyrics full of laughter that carried a deeper sadness if you listened closely. I once got busy in a Burger King bathroom. The world laughed and danced. For once, hip-hop wasn't angry or defensive. It was alive, absurd, and proud of it. Behind the fake nose and glasses, Shock G had created a character, Humpty Hump, a joyful mirror that let people laugh at the pain they couldn't name. He'd taken the tradition of George Clinton's funk and brought it to a new generation. In 1990, the Humpty Dance hit Hasson on Billboard's rap chart and Hassonon on the pop chart. The debut album, Sex Packets, went platinum in weeks. Overnight, the kid who once spun records at Florida block parties was now one of the most creative forces in hip-hop. But Shock G didn't stop there. He used his success to lift others, and one of them was a 19-year-old poet from Baltimore named Tupac Shakur. Tupac was restless, political, brilliant, and broke. Shock saw something in him, a spark too rare to ignore. He brought Tupac on tour with Digital Underground, first as a dancer, then as a voice. The world's first glimpse of Tupac came on the track Same Song, the soundtrack to Nothing But Trouble, 1991. Shock produced it, rapped on it, and handed Pac the mic that would make him a star. He never took credit for it. He never asked for recognition. He simply said, Pac needed a stage, and we had one. That's who Shock G was, the kind of artist who believed that helping someone else shine didn't make his light dimmer. By the early 90s, Digital Underground had become a movement. Their mix of humor, politics, and funk influenced an entire generation. Artists, from Dr. Dre to Outkast, would later say they learned from Shock G's freedom the way he broke every rule and made it sound effortless. For a moment, everything worked. The music, the fame, the laughter. The mask had become a symbol not of disguise, but of liberation. Yet behind that joy, the weight of expectation was building. And like all great artists, Shock was about to learn how heavy success can feel when the applause starts to fade. Fame is loud, but the silence that follows it is louder. After the platinum records, the tours, and the laughter, Shock G began to feel something shift. The label wanted more Humpty, more jokes, more dance songs. But the man behind the mask wanted to talk about something deeper: injustice, addiction, the ache of growing older in a world obsessed with youth. Tommy Boy Records didn't want reflection. They wanted hits. The pressure built quietly, the way pressure always does, one demand at a time. Shock felt boxed in by the very character that had made him famous. He used to control the beat, but now the industry was controlling his rhythm. He said once in an interview, "They loved Humpty, but they never really saw me." By 1993, cracks had begun to show. The third album didn't sell as expected. Critics called it too strange, too conscious, too real. But for Shock, that honesty was the point. When the label dropped Digital Underground, it felt like the end of an era not just for him, but for the kind of hip-hop that dared to be joyful and human. And then came loss. Tupac, the little brother he had mentored, fought with, laughed with, was gone. The 13th of September 1996. The night the news broke, Shock locked himself in a room and played So Many Tears, one of the songs he had produced for Pac. He played it again and again. He said the silence afterward felt like the world had gone off beat. From that point, something in him dimmed. He kept working, producing tracks, mentoring artists, trying to find purpose in creation, but the fire had turned into an ember. The industry had moved on to a new sound. Shock was too soulful for the radio, too honest for the charts. Drugs filled the spaces where music used to live. At first, it was just a way to slow down the noise, a night of escape after years of pressure. But addiction has a way of turning rest into ruin. Meth, ecstasy, pills, whatever made the pain quiet, even for a moment. Friends tried to help. He'd disappear, come back sober, then vanish again. The cycle was cruel, but familiar to too many musicians who gave more than they ever took. In public, he still smiled, still cracked jokes, still performed when he could. But behind closed doors, Shock G was fighting himself. The genius who could make the crowd move couldn't always make himself stand. In one of his last interviews, he said softly, "The mask was never about hiding. It was about surviving." It's strange how those words sound now prophetic, final. By the time the 2000s arrived, hip-hop had changed. The music he helped shape had grown louder, harder, faster. But the funk, the warmth, the humor, they were fading. And with them, so was Shock. He tried to come back releasing a solo album, teaching, mentoring young artists who still called him OG. But the world rarely celebrates its architects while they're still standing. By the time he looked up, the applause had become an echo. And the man who once gave everything to the beat was standing in a room full of silence. When the news broke on the 22nd of April 2021, the hip-hop world fell quiet. Shock G, the man behind the mask, the voice that once made the world laugh, was gone. They found him alone in a Tampa hotel room. The cause was listed as an accidental overdose of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and alcohol. But to those who loved him, the real cause was heartbreak. Across the country, tributes poured in. Old-school DJs played the Humpty Dance on air. Fans posted grainy concert clips and stories about how his music made them feel alive. Artists from every generation spoke his name with reverence. Questlove wrote, "He wasn't just a musician, he was a frequency." Bootsy Collins called him a son of funk. And for one brief moment, the internet became a church of rhythm and memory. In Oakland, the city he called home, murals of Shock G began to appear, painted in colors as bright as his sound. The city council declared August 25th Digital Underground Day, a permanent reminder of the joy he gave to a world that often forgets to smile. On that day, people gathered in the streets, blasting his songs, laughing through tears, dancing not to mourn him but to meet him again the only way he would have wanted. Music journalists began revisiting his legacy, realizing that Shock G was more than a quirky character from the 90 seconds. He was the architect of a bridge connecting George Clinton's funk to Tupac's fire, comedy to consciousness, rebellion to joy. He made it okay for hip-hop to be weird, for black men to be playful and poetic at the same time. He was proof that artistry and kindness could coexist in an industry that often rewards neither. For older fans, his passing felt like the end of something irreplaceable, the last echo of an era when hip-hop was about expression, not algorithms. For younger ones, discovering his music on streaming platforms was like finding a missing chapter in black music history. In the weeks that followed, headlines faded, but the music remained. Clubs, basements, and backyard barbecues across America still spun Sex Packets and I Get Around. Every beat carried a whisper, "Thank you." Because in a country that often forgets its pioneers, Shock G reminded America of its rhythm. He turned grief into groove, and even in death, he made the world dance one last time. There are stories that end with applause, and then there are stories like Shock G's. They end quietly, like the last note of a song still hanging in the air. Gregory Jacobs gave his entire life to rhythm. From a little boy banging on drums in Brooklyn to a man leading crowds across the world, his heart never stopped chasing sound. He didn't just make beats, he built bridges. Between funk and hip-hop, between comedy and consciousness, between the stage and the street. He gave us Digital Underground, a group that turned concerts into celebrations. He gave us Humpty Hump, a reminder that humor is a kind of healing. And he gave us Tupac Shakur, the most powerful voice of a generation, an artist whose first mic came from Shock's open hand. That alone would have been enough to write his name in history. But Shock's real gift wasn't the music, it was the way he made people feel. He believed that art could make the world gentler, that even pain had a melody, that the truest kind of fame was the one that made others shine. And maybe that's why he never asked for credit, because he understood something most never do, that legacy isn't what you keep, it's what you give away. When people talk about him now, they mention the mask, the funny glasses, the laugh. But those who knew him remember something else, the softness in his voice, the generosity in his silence, the way he always put others first. He wasn't perfect, none of us are, but he was real. And in a world built on illusion, being real was its own kind of rebellion. Today, the world he helped shape moves faster, louder, harder. But somewhere in the background, his rhythm still plays in every sample, every joke, every artist brave enough to be themselves. Some stories end without closure, but dignity doesn't need applause. To everyone who ever created something beautiful and was forgotten in the process, we see you. We remember you. And tonight, somewhere out there, Shock G is still on stage, smiling, nodding, the beat rolling on. Because the music never really stops.